Good morning and welcome to Peace Out, where we are learning and improving on the process of piecing out, right? And we're doing it together. There's not a button to push. Wouldn't that be nice though to just push a button and just be pieced out forever? So we sort of can, but it's definitely a process, right, that we've got to work through. And sometimes we got to work through it every single day. I know I do, because stuff just comes. We get new elements in our story, new conflicts and resolutions and new situations and new circumstances, right? And some of them are very good, some of them are a little troubling, and some of them are massively troubling. And we have to just navigate through those knowing that we still have God's peace. His peace doesn't go, oh, problem, I'm out of here, right? We always have God's peace. It's just up to us to make sure that we listen to it rather than the sound of the trouble, right? And actually, I was working on the Peace Out devotional last night, and I got several of them done. So it's coming along as I'm making progress, right? And it's just I remember writing something about that. Is that God's peace there is there? We don't have a situation present itself and God's peace go is just gone, and we got to go find it. We just have to find it in ourselves to get back to that place where we are listening and trusting His peace once again, no matter what comes into our story, no matter what kind of phone call we get, no matter what kind of balance our bank account has, right? That's my problem this morning, but it'll be fixed later today. Anyway, but no matter what elements come into our stories, right? God's peace doesn't leave, it stays. And so it's up to us to figure out how to get back to that place. And that's what I was reading in Psalm 77 this morning. Now, actually, I was reading this psalm last night because I'm reading Louis Giglio's Don't Give the Enemy a Seat at Your Table. And he mentioned the a verse out of Psalm 77 in the New Living, and so I had to look it up, and I'm going to actually use that particular verse in my devotional for caregivers today. But I was like, oh wait, I know Psalm 77. It's one of my favorite ones because it brought me so much hope. Because why? Well, because I'm so glad you asked. Because he Asaph is writing it. He's one of the musicians back in the tabernacle, and he wrote several of the psalms. And he starts out and he's saying, I cried out to God loud. I was yelling at God. I was begging God, right? I would cry out to God, and He listened to me in the day of my trouble. We have In the day of trouble, God is a refuge in the midst of the trouble. He is that peace in the middle of the trouble. He is that presence in the middle of the flood. He is with us, right? No matter what. He said, but in the day of my trouble, that's in the Bible. He put it in the Bible. I sought the Lord. When trouble came, I looked for God. My hand was stretched out to God in the night without ceasing. I was reaching, in other words, he wasn't sleeping. He was reaching out to God, right? He said, I remembered God and was troubled. Who put that in the Bible? I remembered God and was troubled. I complained because my spirit was overwhelmed. They put that in the Bible. God let that be put in the Bible. The Asaph, one of the top psalmists and prophetic psalmists of his day, right, wrote many psalms for God. He was in charge of praising God in the temple and the tabernacle, right? If I remember correctly, I need to go back and remind myself all the stuff he did, right? But he says, I remembered God and was troubled. You're not allowed to say that, but I've said it in my heart because I'm like, I remember the things God did before Chris's wreck, mostly before caregiving, right? And when you're in the middle of the storm, it's easy to look back and go, man, I had things good, and what happened? Why am I in this spot? Where did God go? That's a legit question. And the legit answer is nowhere. He's still where He's always been, and that is everywhere, which means He can't leave you no matter how intense the storm gets, right? He says, my eyelids are open. I'm so troubled I can't speak. I don't have that deep grief very often, but occasionally we do find ourselves in those positions, right? Where I'm so troubled I can't speak. I look back to the days of old, the years of ancient time. I remember my song in the night. I remember leading worship. I remember being on the praise team. I remember the song, right? I meditate in my heart and my spirits. He says in verse 7, will God cast me off forever? Is God no longer favorable? Has his mercy stopped? These are questions we're not always allowed to ask, but God let them be in the Bible. So they must be okay to ask, right? He says, has his promise failed forever? Has God forgotten his grace? Now we know he hasn't, but sometimes we feel like he has. It can feel like his grace is a long ways away. It can feel like his mercy has run out. It did not renew this morning. I didn't pay the light bill and the lights aren't on in Mercy's house. It can feel that way, right? He's and so he's talking about all these things. He's going, I remember all these things and I know all these things about God, but I'm not experiencing them right now. That does not mean you don't have faith. The fact that that bothers you so much actually means you do have faith, because you're looking for something you know is there. You're looking for something you know God has given you, his grace and his mercy, and you're not feeling it in the moment. Or you're looking for that peace and you're not feeling it in the moment, and it's okay to ask. But here's what Asaph did. He says, this is my anguish, thinking that God has changed. But here's what I'm going to do in my pain. I'm going to remind myself of all the things God has done. He says in verse 11, I will remember the works of the Lord. Surely I will remember your wonders of old. I'll meditate on your work. I'll talk of your day, of your deeds. And then he goes on, he goes, you are the God who does wonders. See, he changed it. I don't see your mercy. I don't feel your grace. I'm not getting that peace I'm supposed to be having right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, but you are a God of wonders. You are the God of might. You are the creator of everything we see in nature. Well, you're the creator of me. It even goes down here and says that from one person he created all the nations of the earth. I believe that was in this passage. I think I may be somewhere else I read it today, but he says, you know, he created everything, and so he shifted his gaze. Instead of looking for God doing something right now, he said, I'm going to look at all the things I know God has done. I'm going to start with, he's the creator, and he created me. And somehow when you shift that focus off of how you feel God is failing you, because he's not, but you feel it. There's some real stuff there. We can feel like God's failing us. He's not, but it feels that way. We can feel like he abandoned us. He hasn't, but it can feel that way. It can feel like God's not listening. He's not answering. He's not seeing, but he is. And so what we have to do is shift our thought processes off of what we feel onto what we know, down way deep, down deep in our knowers. One of the biggest struggles I've had since Chris's record, because I thought faith was going to prevent bad things from happening. So I was like, well, then I don't know. Is God even going to protect me? I mean, does God, is he even there? And one of my biggest struggles, because I have had true struggles with faith, and my faith has been completely redefined, thank God, right? And I'm still trusting him for every single day. But one of the biggest struggles I had was believing that God was still with me, but not feeling him. Believing that his peace was still available, but not having it. Believing that his mercies and grace could carry me, but not experiencing it. And then I had to remind myself of who God was. And I had to go back. I had to throw everything out and go back and go, God is the creator. God is faithful. Even if I don't feel like he's faithful, because you can feel abandoned, but he didn't abandon us. We can feel like rejected, but he didn't reject us. That's what Louis Giglio is talking about in his book of giving the enemy a seat at the table. So are you going to listen to what God said, or are you going to listen to what those crazy voices in your head are saying, right? And every day, sometimes many times, multiple times a day, we have to go back and choose to go, God is faithful to me. God loves me. God sees me. And that's what Asaph is doing here in this psalm. He's going, I don't see God doing anything right this minute, but I know of all the things he's done before. I'm going to focus on those. And at the end, he comes back and says, you are the great shepherd. And that's sometimes we got to work through what we see and go back to what we know, and just go back to the truth that God is everywhere. He is with us, and he's going to take us through. And Asaph goes on here and talks about how they got to the Red Sea, and there was no path. And actually in the New Living Translation, it says, you made a pathway no one knew was there. Isn't that our, see, we got to shift our focus off of our feelings and our situations and our circumstances and all the crazy stuff and go back to God, because He makes a pathway through our struggles that no one knows exists. He took them through the Red Sea. He took Daniel through the lion's den. He took the three Hebrew children through the fire. He took Joseph through the prison. But He made a way where no one saw a way. You know, his brothers, Joseph's brothers, made fun of him, going, "We're going to bow down to you." Even his dad said, "You're going to bow down? We're going to bow down to you?" I think not. But what happened? It didn't mean the way was easy. It didn't mean the way was not rocky. It didn't mean there was a button and he was like, "Oh, here we are." See, because there was a process, and the process works things out of us that we don't need when we get what God promised. Right? Those processes, the process of trusting Him in the storm, the process of trusting Him in the fire, the process of trusting Him in the flood, works those things out of us so we can trust Him more, and then we can have His promise. Then we experience more of His promises, right? And so the process works stuff out of us. God doesn't need the process. He's already pure. He's holy. We got to work those blemishes out of us. We got to learn that we can trust Him if we're in a boat in the middle of the storm. We can trust Him if we're looking down at a den of hungry lions. We can trust Him if we're staring down a fiery flame that's been heated up 7 times hotter. We can trust Him like Job when our bodies fail us and it's not, we're sick, or can't quite get through it. We still can trust that God is there, and the process works us out until we can actually have and experience the promise. They had to go through the Red Sea to get to the promised land, right? They went through a whole bunch to get to the promised land, right? But God made a pathway no one knew existed. And He can do the same for us. So if you're in a situation today, and even if you're not, take a moment to just remind yourself of the things that God has done, the things He's already brought you through. Remind yourself that He's given you His peace, that His mercies are new for you today. Brand new mercies for a brand new day. It's not a new day to God. It's just a new day to you, by the way, right? And just remind yourself that He's with you, that He's got you, that He carries you when needed, and He'll never leave you or forsake you. That's why you can peace out. Peace out. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.